Alrighty, hello, and welcome to this build guide for what I'm going to call the Rain of Fire Marksman. This is a build that the community actually voted on. They wanted to make a Hail of Arrows Marksman build, and they wanted it to be fire-based. I thought that sounded pretty cool, and it turns out it is actually pretty cool, and it does a lot of damage. And it's quite a bit of fun. I've really enjoyed playing with it for the last, like, I don't know, 4 days I think it's been. We've gotten pretty much all of the monolith done with it, and nothing is really too challenging for the most part, except for me being dumb. But that's not a problem for the build, that's just a problem of me being dumb. So yeah, the build is really good. I really like it. It's fun. Seeing fire rain from the sky is always great. Let me go ahead and show what it looks like. So we're gonna go ahead and just do a quick mono here. We'll do this one, I guess. The general premise is we're gonna drop Hail of Arrows on pretty much anything. If it's a boss type with a lot of meaty defense, we're gonna drop multiple Hail of Arrows because we have high duration, so they'll actually stack on top of each other. And things die almost immediately, and if they don't, they will die soon after because there is a lot of damage coming out from Hail of Arrows. And Cinder Strike's actually buffing the damage on it, and also doing its own little bit of damage to add to it. Like, where's that dude? I'm gonna kill him because it's gonna be really quick. Yeah, it does very, very good damage. Not super OP, like not the kind of damage like Shadow Dagger style. Like not gonna get nerfed next patch, hopefully. Kind of damage, but enough damage to where it's a strong build. You can do all the content with it, no problem. You can even push this in the arena. Because of the way it is, just the way Marksman is, you can definitely push this build in the arena. I haven't built mine for it with the defenses. But even with that, I did like 180 waves with it in the 70s. And then I just didn't see an attack, and that's how I died. So I didn't die from any of the reasons, you know, build related, just made an error and then died soon. It definitely can push into the 200s and possibly beyond, no problem, with a skilled player with the right defenses. So yeah, it's a lot of fun to just drop a Rain of Fire and watch everything die. And the only real thing that we'll talk about in the pros and cons, and talk about how we do it, the only real downside I think for me is the mana management. If you're not kind of careful with it, you can run out of mana and not be able to use your defensive abilities. But we gain so much mana from hits that it's generally not a problem. Okay, so that's what it looks like. And let's talk about the pros and cons. So as you can see, really good AoE, really good single target. Bosses don't take all that long to kill, even though we have an AoE skill, because we can stack it. It just does a lot of damage on them over time, especially ones that stand in place and have large hitboxes. They go down especially quickly, so Lagon doesn't really pose much of a threat. It's got great mobility, as do just about all Marksman builds. This one's also built to make sure it takes advantage of that. It doesn't need any uniques. We have one unique on it. We don't even need it. It's probably not even best in slot. I just haven't replaced it. So it's generally very solo self-found friendly. Unlike a lot of my builds, this one doesn't require you to do a whole lot of farming. There are really good things that you can get for it, but even if you don't have those, it will still perform quite well. So there's nothing that actually, like, there's no build enabling gear that you need to have to make this work, which is great. And as I mentioned, it can push arenas if you gear it for defense. It's got the ability to kite really well. It does really good AoE and single target damage, and it can do that damage from far away. So like I can attack all the way out here, and I'm just really far away from the enemies, so I can avoid most attacks with it. And of course it's got decoy, which always helps in the arena. So yeah, you can definitely play this as an arena build. Its cons, it's kind of squishy. If you do get hit, you can definitely die fairly quickly if you were standing in things, so you have to be careful with that. And the mana management, as I mentioned, can be kind of a challenge. Let me actually show you what the mana management looks like, because I think this is one of those things that is a make or break for some players. People who don't mind the mana management are going to really like this build. People who just don't want to do it are probably going to be better off with another build. So you drop a Hail of Arrows. It costs a whole lot of mana, you can see. I can run out right there. But then as soon as I Cinder Strike, I get it back pretty quickly because we've got a whole lot of mana regen built in. In some of these cases, I get it back almost immediately. So we can do this really on cooldown, but you do have to hit targets with Cinder Strike in order to get your mana back. If you don't, you'll run out very quickly and you'll stay out. So there is that aspect of it to bear in mind. Okay. What's the skill level of the build? I think it's pretty much, and chat agrees with me on this, it's like an intermediate build. It's not advanced. You don't need a whole lot of gear for it, which really helps for newer players. But that mana management part is why we're kind of saying it's intermediate, because it does take some skill to do that. Also, if you're going to push this in like higher monos or arena, you have to get good with using decoy to make sure you don't get hit. And so for those reasons, it's more of an intermediate build. It'll take some experience playing the game to really get the most out of it. I do think a new player can play this though and do fairly well with it. So this is not one of those builds where you have to shy away from it if you're new. You can still play it. Just know that there are some aspects of it that might take some adjustment, getting used to learning the skill, how it works. As far as future patch considerations go, the only thing really to worry about, there's nothing OP about this build. Hail of Arrows is good, but not like Shadow Dagger, overpowered, broken. But decoy has been a concern in the community for quite some time, because it's such a strong taunt and you can use it so often that I wouldn't be all that surprised if it got nerfed in the near future. I don't know if they would nerf it enough to make these builds non-viable. That would be really bad, obviously. So I don't think it's a major concern, but it is something worth bearing in mind if you are using builds that are really decoy dependent. And this one's somewhat decoy dependent. On higher level stuff, on more dangerous stuff, you definitely become more decoy dependent. On lower level stuff, it's not that big of a deal. But because it does have that dependency in certain scenarios, it could be a problem in the future. So just bear that in mind. Okay, that covers all of that and those aspects of it. Let's go into these skills and specs. Let's see what the skills are. I'm going to go left to right, even though like this is the important stuff. But we'll start left to right. We'll start with shift. This is, of course, your movement ability. One of my favorite nodes in the game, momentum, gives you 50% increased movement speed for 1.5 seconds on a, what's it, 3 second? Is it actually 3 seconds? Yeah, 3 second baseline. So half the time you're going 50% faster. Love that node. 4 in swift recovery for extra mana gen. We've got the 2 in shadow recuperation, which is really just to get to the other stuff here and here. The damage side of this is over here in Jade Quiver, where what we're mostly worried about here is the really actually we're worried about the Jade Arrow stacks on this. The increased critical strike chance, not that big a deal. Poison chance we don't care about really at all, but those 4 stacks is really nice so that we can put more Hail of Arrows with Jade Arrow damage over time on. So you see we have 125% Jade Arrow damage over time on the next skill we use. So generally, or the next 4 really, because you have 4 Jade Arrows. So your goal is to kind of maximize how many Jade Arrows you are using with Hail of Arrows. It's not something you have to think about too hard. Like if you're just shifting consistently and using your Hail of Arrows consistently, most of the time you will get that. But if you really want to like really max your damage out, that would be the consideration there. The only other things we're adding to this are Shadow Slip, which is just a really nice iframe and vulnerability while shifting. And I did get 1 into Elusive for some more dodge rating per dexterity for 1 second after, which is like a nice little extra on the tail after the invulnerability. If you tried to iframe an attack and miss, this gives you a better chance of dodging that, even if you didn't quite get it right. Okay, next up we have Cinder Strike. This is your mana generator, but it's also on top of that a buffer. The first thing over here, we're taking 1 in Soot and Ash to get Eagerness, which is a 24% attack speed on our 2nd and 3rd attacks, which will just increase our mana regen. Also, I want to mention now, I forgot to mention it earlier, Cinder Strike and Hail of Arrows, there's probably a good bit of room still to do some optimization on this build. I haven't tested certain nodes against each other, so I'm going to try to point out nodes I think could be hotspots to where you might be able to pull out a little bit more performance if you feel like testing it, but it's performing so well now that I did not feel the need to go into it all, but I'll point out where they are in case you want to. Next up, we're going to go into Ignition for the Ignite chance, but really that's to open up Oil Coating, which is fire damage per stack. 25%. This gives you a whole lot extra fire damage, and since Hail of Arrows is fire, that's really good for it. Combustible for the Fire Pen, 30% Fire Pen is just like pretty awesome. And Ignite effect is just on there. We have 2 in Elusive for the dodge rating, and the fire is mostly for dodge rating, just to get some extra dodge rating. And I did take Fire Eater to try to get my mana even higher. I'd probably recommend actually not using that. I don't think it's necessary to use it, but if you want to try to really cap your mana, you can take 1 to 3 into this. But if I were to go back and try to rearrange this, I'd probably take it out of here and put it back into Kindling up here, which is the Fire Res Shred chance. Shred is just really good in this game. So the more Shred chance you have, the better for damage. Okay, Hail of Arrows. We have a couple of places here where what makes Hail of Arrows good is it has so many more damage nodes, so those multiplicative nodes. So we've tried to take a little bit in just about every one. First off, though, I took 2 in volley for the increased area, which is really nice. But also I took Sky Strike. This gives you an initial hit. You can go without this, but it does a lot of damage, and it's affected by all of the more nodes in here. The more damage is not affected by damage over time, but all the more damage nodes. So it really does quite a bit of upfront damage. That often will just kill white straight up on the immediate hit. So I really like having that. It's not necessary for the build, but I find that it's nice to have enemies just get deleted, so I keep it. Then we came down here and we took focus, 4 in focus for the more damage multiplier. Is the first more damage multiplier. We took another 3 in Pristine Fletcher, which is 45% more damage. We did lose some radius, but that's okay. We, of course, took Scorched Earth, which converts it to fire. And I took 2 in Arsonist. I actually took these last because you have to have a source of Ignite, which I am getting from Cinder Strike and some gear, but that's another 20% more multiplier on top. If you get, I didn't even bother to really farm for this, but if you get a Hail of Arrows +2, this is probably where I would put it. So like if you get the, I think it's helmet or body armor. I think it's body armor actually. If you get that, this is a good place to put that. Rounding it out, I did 2 in steady for duration, and then 5 of 5 in nowhere to hide for bow damage per second, up to 100% more bow damage. It's just a really good node for damage. And we have Smoke Bomb, which is almost exclusively for defense with 1. Oh, this is actually for blind, and we do get a base crit, but this is for blind with bow attacks. Increased duration. We're getting slow stacks here. We're getting radius and growth speed here. And those are all just to make sure we can stand it longer to get more, more Dust Shroud. We capped out our Dust Shroud capabilities, which is for glancing blow and dodge rating. And then we took Generosity to get over here to take Enfeeblement and Moonlight Bomb, which is one of my favorite nodes in here, which is Silver Shroud stacks. Silver Shroud is a guaranteed dodge up front, and then 300 ward if you take all 3 points. The final thing is Decoy. Decoy is playing a dual role of both shredding the enemy's fire resistance and also a defensive buff. Romantic 666, thank you so much for the follow, much appreciated. I actually forgot to turn off my notification sound, whoops, but much appreciated on the follow, very much so. Also, those who are asking questions in the chat, I will get to you as soon as I'm done making this build guide. So please bear with me just a couple more minutes. Okay, so we've got 3 of 3 in mana efficiency over here, which is nice because we're going to spend a lot of mana on Hail of Arrows. We've got 3 of 3 in Sonic Detonation, where the frailty stacks applied in the armor shred stack. The armor shred stacks are going to be converted over to fire down here, which is awesome. We're going to get like, what, 8 fire shred stacks, which is awesome on the enemy from this. So that really increases the damage. And we take 4 out of 5 in embedded spikes to get that extra charge over here on Decoy. And we finished it up with Lasting Presence for 20% duration, and I did take a dodge rating with Active Decoy. Okay, that's all the skills and specs. Let's go into the passive tree. So a lot of the way rogues build right now, for me at least, is pretty consistent, and this is also the case here, especially for Marksmen. So I've taken 8 of 8 in Swift Assassin. We're taking this node. The attack speed is great, but what's really great about it is that Hail of Arrows itself actually has 300% effectiveness, added bow damage, and it's going to do it does do a conversion, right? I believe it does a conversion. That was the primary reason. So yes, all added bow damage is converted to fire. So even that fizz damage becomes fire damage. So it's a perfect just synergy right there. Okay, next up we've got 1 in Guile, which is to get up to 5 of 5 in evasion, 25% less movement or damage while moving, and increased dodge rating. And then 5 of 5 in agility for haste on hit chance and damage per movement speed. We've got 4 of 4 in sapping strikes, which is one of our primary ways of gaining mana. We'll see the other way in a minute. It's all related to Cinder Strike, but this is the first node you take. And then you'll notice I've got 6 of 8 in Coated Blades up here for more damage, but more mana consumed for a skill that costs mana. That's another multiplier, which is very rare to see in a passive tree. It does make Hail of Arrows cost a lot more. Do not take this until you can take, excuse me, until you take, actually, yeah, this, until you can take this, because you're gonna need that extra mana. You're just absolutely gonna need it to regen. Oh, so this is gonna get too expensive. So definitely take this later. Work up the Marksman tree first, but you're gonna want it because it's gonna add a lot of damage. Okay, back to the Marksman tree. We've got 5 of 8 in draining arrows for health gained and bow attack speed. We have got additional damage over here, and then I've jumped up here and taken 1 in Wound Maker and 5 in Heightened Senses for the critical strike avoidance. If you can get your critical strike avoidance elsewhere without any major sacrifices, like for example from the dragon, you can take it right out of this. That's really all it's doing. We don't crit very often at all in any way that's meaningful. All right, next up, elemental arrows, a really strong part of the build. We're going to get additional damage, lightning and fire, when we have our elemental arrows up, which is just from moving. An additional 35% increased damage and increased arrow generation rate on top of that. From there, we go all the way up. We're going to take 1 in Arrow Storm just to open up Covering Fire, which is one of my favorite nodes in Marksman for defense. I've currently taken 6 of 10. I'm working on 10 of 10 on that. That's the next thing I'm going to finish up with. And 6 of 6 in Sniper's Gambit for a similar reason to Draining Arrows. Plus 30 bow fizz damage at, what do you say, 300%? 300% effectiveness. That's a lot of base damage added to it. You do take more damage from nearby enemies, so bear that in mind. You don't want to be standing close to enemies with this build. 10 of 10 ethereal arrows gives us more mana and increased damage, equal to a portion of our mana cost, which is high, and 500% is awesome. Yeah, we've got 92 mana cost. That's really good. 3 of 5 in a mana warp is all I needed. If you need more mana, you can go 5 of 5. And then 2 in Master Archer for the increased Hail of Arrows area. Okay, that covers the skills and the passive tree. Let's go into the gearing. Gearing is not hard for this build in comparison to some other ones. The one thing that I really like as far as a stat is duration with Hail of Arrows. So I've got like a 7 here, I've got a 14 here, I've got an 8 here. This one actually doesn't have, this has fire damage and stun avoidance. And then I've got 23 here. Those are really good. Damage while wielding a bow is really good. I've got that in 2 places. Vitality is really good for everything. And when you get a plus 22 vitality, why not take it? Let's see. Other stats that are important. You want added damage, both fire and fizz on your bow. And if you can get it on your quiver, because again, 300% effectiveness and they're all converted to fire. So that's how you're going to get the most damage out of it. Your defenses are going to be based around resistances and dodge. So crit avoidance of capping is always a good thing to do. Resist capping, get a lot of dodge. You'll notice I've got a lot of dodge on my gear. Dodge there, increased dodge there. Dexterity is really good stat. If you find health along the way, definitely take it. Health's a good, general stat. Mana efficiency on your amulet is really good, along with fire pen. I definitely recommend mana efficiency because 11% mana efficiency on this is like, it's cutting out like 10 plus mana on that skill. It makes it a lot more manageable to use. And if you want to add mana regen, like I've got it here, you can. It's not necessary. It's going to do very little in comparison to Cinder Strike, but it is an option if you feel that you're a little bit too mana starved to just kind of help out a little bit. I like movement speed rings, especially on Marksman, but on most of my builds. As far as offense goes, fire damage, elemental damage over time are great options to take. You definitely want some chill somewhere. Man, I think that's about it. I don't think there's any other stats you really need to worry about. As far as, well, your secondaries for the idol. So you want Hail of Arrows duration, but increased damage while wielding a bow. Bow damage, because this is a bow skill. So see a bow attack there. Fire damage, these are all really good options, and I'm lucky enough to have them on all my idols. Yeah, I think that's everything, chat. Did I miss anything? I don't think so. I think we're good to go on the gearing. Okay, last thing, rotation. I'll just do it right here. So it's pretty simple. You guys kind of saw it earlier. You're gonna drop your Hail of Arrows on the enemy, and you're gonna hit them with Cinder Strike, and you're going to cap up your mana, and you're gonna do it again, and you're gonna cap up your mana. Use decoy when you need it. Continue up the rotation. You can drop a smoke bomb if things get a little crazy, so that you have the additional stacks of Silver Shroud and shoot, what's the other one called? Silver Shroud and Dust Shroud. So that'll significantly increase your defenses. And of course you want to use Shift to move around. And Shift also gives you Jade Arrows. So you get Jade Arrows and you get Elemental Arrows for moving. Shift specifically gives you the Jade. Elemental gives you, is given to you from the movement. And from there, when you max them out, you'll do a lot more damage. Like I'm getting 5, 6, 7. You're up to over 9,000, over 10,000 damage by putting both those on. Let me actually remove those and you can see the difference. Actually gonna remove this too. This is also a nice buff. This is the one from, that's oil coating from Cinder Strike. So if I don't attack with those, the number is quite a bit lower. We got up to over 10,000 before, and now we dropped down to 7,600. So we lost 25% of our damage by not using those. So ideally, you'll pick up your elemental arrows. You will shift to get your Jade Arrow, and then you'll attack, and then you'll regen, and rinse and repeat. That is the rotation. Okay, I think that covers everything on the build. 21 minutes in, that's not too bad. All right, if you have any questions or would like to discuss the build further, you can feel free to join us on the Twitch, on my Twitch, on my Twitch channel, or just see the kind of builds that we're making, be a part of the community, even offer your suggestions or things that you'd like to see. You can also ask questions on my Discord. We have our community on Twitch tends to also be on our Discord, so we tend to talk in both areas. We'd love to have you there as well. Sorry you were gone. Can you do it again? Very funny, Zakar. Yeah, all right. I think that covers everything. I hope you really enjoy this. If you like fiery arrows of doom, this is probably the build for you, and I really enjoyed making it, and I really appreciate the community for suggesting it and voting on it. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the build, and I hope you enjoy your time in Last Epoch, and I will see you all again real soon.